Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today I'd like to share with you this alla prima portrait of a Scrappy Poodle. We have a poodle with a lot of personality in our house, and I thought it would be fun to do an alla prima portrait and share my process along with you. This tutorial will be good for beginners. It uses 3 simple colors and you can use any brushes that you would like. I will be using Gamblin colors, but you can use any oil paints that you have, and this tutorial would even work with acrylics. There are a few simple tools to use. Of course, you'll want to use a palette. I use a glass toned mixing palette, and you'll also want to have mediums to help blend the paint. I have Gamasol here for the underpainting and the sketch, liquid for the actual painting medium, and then I will be using 3 different colors. I will be using titanium white, the burnt sienna for the sketch, Mars black for the darks, and Prussian blue for the background. I like to choose Mars black because it tends towards the blue, so it will go along well with the blue background. I also have a blending brush, a square brush, and 2 round brushes in different sizes. And you can use any brushes that you're most comfortable with, but I find working in these sizes is very helpful. Here is a quick screenshot of my sketch, and you can save this and transfer it however you would like, or however your process is. Transfer paper is really helpful for transferring to the canvas, and I use vine charcoal, which I will paint over. My first part of the process is, of course, toning the canvas with the burnt sienna and the thinned down Gamasol, and then after I have transferred my sketch to the canvas, I go over the sketch with thinned out burnt sienna and Gamasol to help solidify the lines. This painting will be done in alla prima, which means it's done all in once or all in one sitting. It took about an hour for me to create this painting, and having a sketch like this is really helpful just in getting the placement. One of the things that I like to do is just look at the composition, make sure that I have the eyes, the nose, the mouth, of course, in the correct place when doing a portrait, but also starting to think about where I would like my darkest darks and my lightest lights. Our poodle has silver hair, which turns towards white, and the reference photo that I am using, his hair is actually more white and gray. So I want to keep this in mind as I'm painting. Of course, if you want to paint along at home, you could change the colors very easily to have them match any colors that you most like, brown or even a darker black. Just be sure that you have a light, a medium, and a dark tone of whatever colors it is that you pick to help you as you move forward. So the most recessed parts of the face of the dog should be darkest because they will have the least amount of light and they will be in the most shadow. So I am making sure that the area around the eyes are dark, and he also has a darker ears and some darkness around his snout and under his lips as well. Our dog has a bit of an underbite, so it often looks like he's smiling, and so I wanted to include that in this portrait, so you'll see me painting teeth, which is kind of unusual for a pet portrait, but we wanted to honor his quirky personality. When I am doing an alla prima portrait like this, I like to think of the process as helping me to practice. So a lot of times I'm not going for photorealism, which is something I'm still very, very much practicing. I'm not going for an exact, accurate depiction, but something that's more inspired by the subject. And so what most inspires me from this animal, and my reference photo of the animal is his scraggly, scruffy, fluffy fur and his big brown beautiful eyes. So those are the things that my goal is to really capture with this portrait as I move forward, so that I can kind of get that essence of him and who he is. I'm just continuing to look at the dog and look at my reference photo, and to really kind of think about where those darks and those lights are, to start to build form and shape in the face. And so if you are following along, just kind of being sure to make that placement will help you when we start to go in and we start to add the colors. I'm also squiggling a little bit of hair just so I can get an idea of what that will look like and where my lightest colors will be, especially when I start to add in the wisps of hair towards the end of the painting. As you can tell, the more detail that you put onto the underpainting, the more of an idea you can get for what the finished painting will look like. But oftentimes the underpainting becomes a bit of a suggestion as you get further into the painting. So don't feel tied to the sketch. You know, feel free to make your own choices and make your own decisions and make your own changes if you want the ears to be longer or perkier, or if you want there to be less hair on top of the head. These are all things that you can play with as you move forward. Now that the underpainting is done and I have a good idea of where I want to place the different colors, I'm going to go in and work on the background. I'm using Prussian Blue, and this is a student grade paint. Since this is a practice painting, I am not so much concerned with using my best paints. So I'm kind of mixing and matching a bit here, but I'm going to mix that Prussian Blue with a titanium white, my very well used and loved titanium white. I like to use titanium white whenever I'm doing an underlayer or I'm working on a layer that I do not need to go back and glaze later. Using a lead white usually is a bit more transparent, so the titanium white was my choice here. I'm also using Mars Black, and as I mentioned, I do like the Mars Black because it tends towards blue, and so I want to complement the colors in the dog with the background, but also make the background light enough that the dog will pop off. And I'm also showing my medium of Liquin, and that's just Liquin Original. And what I like to do for the backgrounds is I just barely dip the tip of the brush into the Liquin, just to give me enough to make the paint a little bit smoother and to make it flow a little bit easier. So I'm not actually showing that, but anytime that I'm using the Liquin, it's just a very small amount. If you put too much Liquin in your mix, it can make it shiny and a little bit difficult to glaze over when you do a painting with longer drying times between layers. Of course, this is alla prima, so that's not so much of a concern, but really just a little drop of Liquin on the end of the brush is all that's needed. For the background, as I mentioned, I wanted to make it a little bit of a lighter blue, but still tending towards the gray. So the first thing I do is just mix together the Prussian Blue with the white, and I add a little bit of a touch of that Mars Black, just so that I can have the same colors mixed into all areas of the palette, and this will help the colors to unify together, in my opinion. I mentioned in past videos that painting for me has been a very exciting and a very fun learning process. So there are many different ways to approach a painting, and there are many ways to approach doing backgrounds and underpaintings and sketches, and I'm just sharing the process that I'm using currently. As a painter, the more you learn, the more your process will start to evolve. You'll find that there are certain techniques that you enjoy. There are certain things that work well for you and your style, and there are certain things that may not work as well. So I find that starting with that background is very helpful, and it helps me also to judge more carefully the colors that I put into the portrait as I paint. There is a portrait of a man with a pipe painting that I have on my channel, and I thought I had the skin tones really, really great. And when I went and put in the gray background, it completely changed. And that's due to color theory and how colors work together and complementary colors and whatnot. So I find that starting with the background is a good way to kind of bring up the painting together as you are working on it. So I'm starting with this gray background, and then to give a little bit more variation and a little bit more of a blurred and blended effect, I do go back in and I add a touch of white, just to bring a little bit more light in. And I also like to darken the corners of the painting up, and you'll see me do that in just a second. Darkening the corners of the painting can be really helpful in drawing the eye into the center of the painting. So it's something that I recommend that you try and that you experiment with, and see how it works for you and see if you like it. So here I am, just darkening up those corners and making sure that I have covered every area of the canvas. One of the great things about doing the tone and doing the sketch is that when you've toned the canvas, it's not as glaringly obvious if you miss a small spot, but I do like to have soft edges, so I'm going ahead and blending out. And it's okay if you blend a little bit into your sketch, and that will help to make the portrait a little bit more organic. Since we're doing alla prima, which means all at once, the underpainting is still wet, so you're going to see a little bit of that color blend in. I'm using a blending brush here just to eliminate those brush strokes and to give a nice smooth background to the portrait. Once I'm happy with the background, I will go in and I will start to work on the actual figure of the dog. As I mentioned, what I'm really concerned with is first thinking about the placement of the lights and the darks and just getting a basic idea of where these different colors should be. I'm using a round brush, and I'm starting with a larger brush. This is an 8x8 square canvas, so it is a little bit smaller, but I like to start with that bigger brush and then use a smaller brush for details at the end, and that helps me to focus on colors and areas of color rather than fine details. When you're painting, it's always best to save those fine details for the end. So the darkest parts, as I indicated in my sketch, are under the eyes, around the eyes, and around the nose. So I will start with my darkest color and go in and add this. Due to the texture of the dog's fur, it does blend out from the dark to the lighter at the end, so I'm not so concerned with putting this blackest black down, because I know that these colors will blend together and soften out a little bit. And in fact, I will go back in and I will put the darker black in again at the end. So here I will continue to put in these darks until I feel I have hit all of those areas of shadow and all of those areas of recess, and then I will move on to my medium color or my mid-tone color. This area of eyebrow ridge was a bit tricky for me. He has these kind of like fluffy eyebrows that pop off, and then this separate kind of head poof. So I had a little bit of trouble deciding how much of the shading I wanted to put into this area. So you're gonna see that I go back and forth on this a little bit. Once I have all of my dark areas in, I'm gonna go ahead and mix more of a mid-tone. And this mid-tone is mixed just from the Mars Black and the Titanium White, a drop of liquid on the edge of the brush, and just want to get a color that's a touch lighter than the black. And I will go in and start working the next area with this mid-tone color. And what this does is it starts with that dark black, and then it transitions into this middle color, which starts to give form and give shape to the face. So you're going to see that very soon the eyes will look like they're actually set into the fur. The lightest colors will be those that are closest to you, and the darkest colors will be those that are away from you. And if you don't get these colors right exactly the first time, just continue to play with them and continue to blend. The really nice thing about a portrait like this and the alla prima is that you have room to experiment and to see what the different colors are doing, and play with the brush and play with the paints. A lot of learning how to paint is just experimenting, trying a lot of new things, trying a lot of new techniques, and seeing what works best for you. It can be a bit of a trial and error. It can be a fun challenge if you allow it to. So don't worry so much about getting things perfect. Just kind of think about your process, think about the feel of the brush, and think about the form of the piece as you're looking at it. There is a great saying that's paint what you see, not what you think you see. And I think that it's kind of hard to conceptualize what that actually means until you go in and you start looking at a piece and breaking it up into things like shapes and colors of area and colors of light. Now I am mixing a third shade of gray, and this one is a bit lighter, and I'm just going in and transitioning again out from that second shade and starting to fill in the rest of the face. When painting alla prima, my approach with this fur was that I wanted to be sure to get the entire face covered, and then once I have the face covered with the basic colors, I can go back in and add in more details. So as I continue to work, I'm just kind of playing with the mixture of black and white so that I can make the colors go lighter and lighter and lighter, saving the last bit of white for those strands of fur that we'll do at the end. here I'm going to go ahead and add in the eyes, and I like to add in the eyes around this point in the painting, because this is when things start to really come together, and I like to see the eyes to start to make the painting start to take on a bit of a personality. Some people like to paint in the eyes first, and some artists like to leave the eyes until the end, so this is really just a personal preference. For me, I feel like once you've painted in the eyes, you start to have a bit more of an interaction with the painting, and it's really interesting how paintings will start to take on their own personalities, especially when you're experimenting in this way. So in order to paint in the eye, I'm bringing back that same burnt sienna that I used for the underpainting, and I've just mixed it with a little bit of the Mars black, and I make these dark brown circles. Think about the fact that the eyes should be sisters rather than twins, and that will take a little bit of the need for perfection away from doing eyes, because eyes are really difficult, and this should be a fun alla prima painting. So you want to have those two dark circles, and then what I'm doing now is mixing a lighter shade of brown using my titanium white, and then I'm just adding a bit of a half circle swoop at the bottom of the eye, and this is to show where the reflected light would come into the eye. You don't want to do it all the way around, because normally the light kind of comes in towards the bottom and the sides. Think about where your light source would be, and then once I've added in that half swoop, I will go in and add the dark pupil. And I find that adding the pupil, it can be a bit of a challenge, because you want to be sure that the pupils are looking in the same direction and are the same size. So just give your brush a good wipe out, and then get that black and go in and make another kind of smaller circle. And you know, as I said, when you're doing an alla prima, and when you're a beginner especially, be easy on yourself and celebrate when things come out really well. If something's really challenging for you, you don't have to get it right on the first painting that you do, but just note that that's something that you want to continue to practice. And for me, I still very much always want to be practicing eyes, because that is something that I find I have an area of challenge with, and they're so important to the painting. So you'll find that there are things that you are naturally very good at, and things that you have challenges as well. And don't get discouraged. Just celebrate what you do well, make note of what you can do better next time, and keep practicing. And eventually you're going to get it, and you're going to master that skill. The last thing that I'm doing here is just adding a little bit of that shine into the eyes to give them a kind of a more dynamic or wet look. And often with these highlights in the eyes, I know I mentioned saving the highlights for last, but I do put them in the eyes, and I'll normally go back and kind of refine them towards the end of the painting. But there, now we have a bit of a face with a personality, and we can start to see the dog actually coming through in the painting. So since I have the majority of the colors covered, I'm starting to go back in and blend colors together, bringing that black out just a little bit farther as I look at my dog and I look at the reference painting, and I start to kind of think, okay, well, how are these colors mashing and blending together? So I'm usually very conservative with the darks when I first lay them down, because you can always go back and you can always add more later. And here you see that I'm continuing to work on that chin so that I can have a separation between the head and the body. And so there is a lot of back and forth with going and blending the colors and bringing more color in. And just remember that with the painting, the worst that can happen is that you can wipe it off and start over, or wait for it to dry and paint over, or do several layers. So just have fun with it. I will also go in and kind of fill in that spot around the eye now that I have the shape of the eye kind of mapped out. And this helps to set the eye into the socket there and start to bring a more kind of complete structure to the face. I'm also blending out this darker hair around the eye so that I can start to bring in several different colors. Or shades, I should say. Shades. At this point, it's also really important to start paying attention to the brush strokes and the direction of the brush strokes. So you can see as I'm starting to paint in the cheeks, I'm having the brush strokes go down. As I'm starting to paint in the chest, I'm thinking about the direction that the hairs are going, and I am kind of moving the brush in those directions. So at this point, which is the midpoint of the painting, I'm transitioning from just laying down color, to starting to think about what those brush strokes are going to look like at the end of the painting. And so I've got a little bit more of movement, a little bit more of a bend and a curl to some of these strokes, and you want the strokes to be going in the general direction that the hair would go in. We're still continuing to layer, but we want to start to have that movement so that the brush strokes start to emulate the texture of the hair. This can be really fun if you allow yourself to just kind of relax and play with it and have fun. The nose is mostly black with a little bit of a white sheen to it. So here I am filling in the nose, putting the nostril parts as the darkest of the dark, and then going back in just like I did with the fur and kind of looking at different shades of gray so that I can have a bit more form. Just like with the face, the most recessed parts will be the darkest, the highest or the closest to you parts will have that shine to them. So you're going to see that I go back in with a lighter shade of gray and I add the shine at the top of the nose and then on the side of the nose as well to help give a bit more of a rounded form. If I were to do this painting over several sessions, I could go back in and I could glaze whites over or grays over and put a lot more texture in the nose. But since this is alla prima, I'm mostly concerned with just getting those basic colors in the right spots. The mouth was a lot of fun to paint, and painting a dog with an overbite is really an interesting process because dogs shouldn't have smiles and teeth like this, but our dog does like to smile. So his lips are very, very dark, very, very black, and the bottom lip in the reference photo had a bit of a shine to it. So the first thing I'm doing is kind of going back in with those blackest or darkest blacks and refining the shape of the mouth and the shape of the lips. And then I will put a little bit of a highlight color in there as well. If you have a lot of black or a lot of extra color on your brush, I like to just kind of pick it up and add it to somewhere else in the painting if I'm still kind of playing with shades, and that way you're blending those colors together. Some artists do like to pre-mix all of their colors and have different piles of colors. I am someone who likes to mix on the palette and mix as I move forward because I feel that this helps me to get a better variation of color and to have many different levels of color, because the color is constantly changing and the mix is constantly changing. And for something like this, that's really great because you want to have that difference and that movement to give it more depth. So just kind of depending on the type of painter you are, you might feel more comfortable having pre-mixed these 4 different shades of gray and then white, or you may enjoy kind of mixing as you go along, as I do. I also find that this helps to conserve paint for me, because sometimes I'll change my mind during the course of a painting, or change color, or change the hue or the shade. So this helps me to be a bit more conservative and also have that great color variation as I continually mix. The more that you learn about color theory and the more that you learn about color mixing, the easier it becomes to replicate these colors and to have an idea of what happens when you mix different colors together. This painting is very simple. We have 4 colors, or the 3 basic colors plus the burnt sienna for the background, and so there's not a lot of think work that goes into mixing the various shades of gray. But when you start to use blues and reds and mixing your own greens and your own browns and your own blacks, it can get a bit more complicated, and you want to study color theory a bit. But mixing on the palette can be a really fun way to learn not only about your brush strokes, but also about how the colors come together and what can be done with the different colors. So I know I've mentioned this a few times, but don't be afraid to experiment as you move forward. Now I'm moving to the smallest brush, which is another round brush, and I'm starting to go in and add a bit more detail. So the dog has a bit of light shining on the upper lid of his eye, and I'm adding this in with the white. And your brush, when you go in with the white, will start to pick up the different colors from the canvas, and that's okay. What I like to do, and I think you saw me do this a little bit earlier, is I just continue to wipe out my brush. Some artists like to use a different brush for darks and a different brush for lights, and that works really well too, so that you don't contaminate or cross mix colors when you're using these kind of brighter colors on darker colors. Whatever works for you is fine. I don't have a problem with just kind of going in and wiping out the brush. You can also use a solvent like Gamasol to rinse your brush out, but I do find that using the solvent sometimes it kind of plays with the consistency of the paint. So just be aware of that if you are washing your brush out between strokes. Anybody who's watched a Bob Ross tutorial, you see him brushing and banging out his brush and his solvent, which is not something that I would recommend doing in your home studio. Now I'm adding in the kind of grayish color for the teeth and the highlight here on the lip. I was not very detailed or very methodical about the teeth at all. I just kind of added in white and put in some lines for the teeth. If I were to do this in a painting with more detail, I would of course go in and pay more attention there and make the teeth look more realistic, but I just wanted to have that hint of the smile underneath the fur here. So now this is the exciting part, because this is where we are going to start going in and adding fur into our painting. So you can see that I am mixing white here and being mindful of my brush strokes, being mindful of how the colors are kind of coming off on the canvas, what direction the brush is going in, the curve of the fur. I'm going to go in and start to add that kind of final layer or final texture of fur. This is another one of those steps where you can put as much detail as you would like. I, of course, gave myself the challenge of spending about an hour on this painting. So that is kind of where I stopped with my detail and my brush strokes. But of course, when you're painting at home, you have as much time as you would like. So if you want to add in more detail or play with the painting, add in more colors, I recommend that you do that, because we learn as we experiment and as we try new things. So don't be afraid. You're not going to mess up your painting. You've only got a little bit of time invested in it, and even when a painting doesn't turn out, it's still a great learning experience. So I'm just kind of going in and hitting those highlight areas and starting to build up the fur texture, and I will continue to build up the fur texture as I move forward, adding in more color and bringing the white up to a brighter layer of white as I get to finer and finer brush strokes. So you can see I'm using a smaller brush here and starting to just add those strokes in. One of my favorite parts of painting hair is to add these little wispies in, because I feel like this is where we start to get a little bit more of a level of realism. And of course, I mentioned that that's not really what I'm going for here, but it kind of brings another level to the painting to have these wispies sticking out over the side. As I mentioned before, you never want to paint with a hard outline around. You always want to have your background and your figure kind of blending into each other. So this is a great way to have that effect and still have the figure kind of stand out a bit from the background. So my biggest recommendation for painting these kind of wispy curly hairs that extend over to the background is try to avoid doing patterns. So you don't want to have an equal amount of space between the wispies. You don't want to have them all be the same shape or the same length. You want to just kind of play around and make it random, and this can be really fun. And it's one of the parts that I look forward to when I start a painting, is when I get to this stage where I can kind of play and be creative and just see what marks the brush makes when it goes down onto the canvas. So it's a lot of fun. Here you can see that I am starting to look at things like the bridge of the nose, and I'm really paying attention to the directions that the hairs would go in, how the hairs would lay on the face, and I'm trying to emulate that with the brush strokes as I add in these wispies. If at any point when you're adding in the hairs you feel like you've gone too dark, or maybe you've put in too much white or too much of the light color, it's okay, because you can always come in and put in a little bit more of the dark and start to blend it out. So don't feel like you've gone too far. I probably went a little bit lighter in this painting than I needed to, and I could always go back in once this is dried and glaze a little bit of dark back in there, or add a little bit more color. It's not a big deal when you're using oil paint. That's one of the wonderful things about oil paint, is you can wait for it to dry and you can go back and glaze in. And if you guys are interested in that, I can make a tutorial about my process for doing that at a later time. But just have fun, play with the hair. My dog is very scraggly, so it gave me a little bit of a freedom in not needing to make uniform curls or have everything be just right or just perfect, because he's a bit of a wild and goofy dog. So It does take a little bit of time to add in all of these strokes, but I believe that the overall effect is really charming, and it helps to bring that personality into the portrait. Those eyes are peering back at me as I'm painting, and it's a lot of fun, and it's a great process. It's a lot of fun to do this. And at the end, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to come back in. I'm going to add a little bit more of the black, especially around the snout, to blend out some of these lines that seem a bit harsher with the light gray, whitish paint color. Here's where I'm starting to go back in and add in the darker black, just to have a bit of a better transition between the black and the white areas. I don't want to have such a harsh kind of line there, and this helps to blend that out and blend the black in. As you take the black into the white, it's going to naturally make this kind of grayish color. I'm also thinking about how I can differentiate those eyebrows and make them a bit brighter than the kind of ridge of the head behind there, and just softening up the painting in some areas where the lines might be a little harsh, adding in a little bit more of the darker colors to create more form in the curls and the hair, and just kind of eyeballing it and looking at the painting, looking at the reference photo, looking at my dog. You could squint your eyes a little bit so that you're seeing the colors, not so much in the details, and that can really be helpful. I'm also at this point looking to make sure that I've covered up any areas where that original underpainting might be showing through. So I see some of that in the ears and some of that in the transition areas of the face. My dog does have a bit of that kind of brownish sienna colored fur in some places, so I'm not too concerned with having that color show through, but I just want to be sure that I've done the best I can in covering up all areas of the canvas, and adding a few more of those little wispies into the ears as well. One area that I was not too happy with as I was painting is this kind of snout area. In the reference photo that I'm using, he's kind of looking to the side and up, which made the snout placement a little bit wonky, so I'm just kind of refining that and refining the nose. In just a minute I'll go in and do that as I add in those darker colors. If at any point you feel that the painting is starting to get muddy or a little bit too wet or too oily, you can take a shop towel, not a paper towel, but a shop towel, and press that to the surface, and that will get up some of the excess oils and allow you to have a bit of a firmer paint as you go back in and add on layers. Now you're just pressing, you're not moving the cloth at all, and it does take out some of the details and kind of blurs things a little bit, so just keep that in mind. You'll see that after I've done that, I do need to go back in and add the highlight back into the eye. But what that does is it just kind of helps to avoid having too much mud mix on the canvas, which is an issue that painters, new painters especially, run into when doing any kind of alla prima application. If you've ever done a landscape, you've probably mixed like these muddy colors, and so using the shop towel can be really helpful. This is actually a tip that I learned from watching Kevin Hill's tutorials, and he's a wonderful landscape artist that I recommend that everybody check out. But that shop towel trick is really great for giving the painting a little bit of space and kind of firming up those colors a little bit. It's almost as if you've let it dry for a little while and you're coming back to it. Well, it's still blendable, but more easily manageable. And as you can see, I'm just kind of going back in and adding a little bit of that detail to the eye, adding in the darkest darks again, just so that I have the eyes as the deepest kind of recess of the face. What I'm doing off camera here is I'm actually getting the liquid, and I am trying to get a nice thin consistency with the liquid and the white on the brush, and also looking for a smaller brush. And I actually did this off the screen because my palette is standing up, and if I were to put the liquid on the palette here, it would just kind of run down and make a mess. When you are doing these smallest highlights, using a bit more liquid is helpful in making the paint flow. Some artists like to use Gamasol at this stage and kind of thin out the paint. You can do that as well. I find the liquid is helpful for not making it as runny as using a Gamasol would be. I wouldn't want to ruin any of the other colors that I've done. And I'm just adding in that little bit of white highlight again and bringing some of the fur of the bridge of the nose back over to give a little bit more dimension to the eyes. I'm also going back over the mouth again. You'll notice that whenever you do a portrait or really any painting, you will move around from spot to spot on the portrait, or at least I move around from spot to spot on the portrait, and you kind of start to bring the portrait up together. So when one area gets more detailed, then you're going to go want to work on another area and bring that area up to that same level of detail. So if you're moving back and forth on your painting, that is perfectly natural. Some artists do work in one area and they finish one area and they move on to the next, and I think that's pretty amazing, but that's not how my brain works. So this is my process. So I'm just adding in those last little white highlights to just bring in the shine on the nose, bring in those last kind of few hairs there, and to give that final bit of form to the painting. I am pleased with where it has gone so far, and as I mentioned, it's not an exact photorealistic copy of my dog, but I feel that I have definitely captured his personality, and I've had a lot of fun in the process, which I think is what's really most important for me as an artist, is to learn something new, to challenge myself, and to have fun. So this was a 1 hour alla prima painting challenge, and within those constraints I've been successful in my opinion with looking at my dog and painting this Scrappy Poodle. Of course, when you finish a painting, there are always going to be things that you want to change and that you want to improve on. And I recommend, just like with creative writing, finish the piece and then take those lessons and move on to the next piece, and that will help you to improve that next piece. So don't feel that you have to spend days and days and days or repaint the same painting several times. You can if you want, and that can be a great learning experience, but be easy on yourself and celebrate your successes, celebrate what you did well, and just make note of what you'd like to continue to work on. And that has been my process for learning oil painting and for kind of moving forward and picking up new skills, and I feel that it's worked really well for me. A lot of times we kind of get bogged down in the perfectionism of things, and we lose sight of why it is that we wanted to start doing something in the first place. And for me, painting was a spot to have fun and to be creative and to learn and challenge myself, and just kind of get a feel for something new and create these images for my life that I find to be really beautiful, and these ideas from my brain that I find to be really beautiful. And any of us who engage in creative activities, you know what I mean. I also enjoy writing short stories and poetry, and I have the same kind of approach. You go in and you tell a story, and you do the best that you can. You learn from that, and then you move on to the next piece, and every piece gets a little bit better than the last piece. And so I think if you bring that approach, especially for those of us who are new painters or who are beginners, if you bring that approach in to your painting practice, you really can't go wrong, because it's not a competition, it's a journey. So here I am, just adding in those last little bits of fur. This part is so much fun. I could probably do this all day. and just kind of thinking about, especially at the front of the painting where we're going to be focusing on, which are the eyes and the snout. So I will continue to add in these little hairs. The final area that I focus on is the area under the neck on the chest of the dog. And I find that this area does not need as much detail as some of the other areas do, because we're really focusing mostly on the face. So I haven't put as many defined brush strokes on the chest area, and I think that that helps to lead the eye up towards the face, or at least that's the effect that I was going for with these final kind of strokes here. I'm continuing to work on the cheeks and refining the snout. The snout was probably the area that gave me the most challenge when painting this portrait, and so that's definitely something that I will continue to think on and refine on and bring texture into. And I'd like to try a similar portrait where I spend more time and do an underpainting, a grisaille layer, and bring in those different types of textures. So that might be something that I look to in the future. Giving that final a bit of highlight on the teeth here to bring out his smile as well. And if I didn't want to have the smile, I could have just put kind of like the line of the lips, and that would have given that impression of his lower jaw there as well. My little dog loves to stay in the studio with me as I paint, so it has been so much fun to honor him in a painting and to make him part of my process. He actually sat in the window seat in my studio and watched. You saw him pop into the frame there. Here is the finished painting. This was a fun 1 hour alla prima challenge. and I feel it was successful in capturing some of his personality. And thank you so much for watching along with me. I do hope you try this painting at home. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share, and we'll be back for more tutorials soon. Thank you so much, everyone.